Louisiana. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I waken to the soft female sound of my wife breathing the deep breath of sleep. I get up on my elbow and listen and watch. The moment is serene and solacing. The world is not with us then, just love and us. I watch over her as she, waking and sleeping, does for me. I have known this feeling forever, and the sound too. It is the ancient and eternal, coming from my mother, sleeping in the front seat of a '42 Pontiac, barreling down the road, my father at the wheel, Dave and me in the back seat, the danger left behind, going back north, going home. We had been in Louisiana. We got on the L&N one morning, headed for New Orleans. Before we left, we stayed all night with Uncle Lawrence and Aunt May on St. Paul Street on the south side. Uncle Lawrence, I am sure, was never in his life called Larry. He was stern, unsmiling, wore a tie to dinner, and drove an immaculately cared for 1931 DeSoto. It was his pride and always shined to a see yourself in it perfection. I still have his old mantel clock, which he wound every Saturday night after the Ted Mack original amateur hour. Mom had bought junior versions of adult suits for us and posed us in the backyard for pictures. We got on the train early, all of us carrying satchels. Dave and I had not been on a passenger train before, so suited and wide-eyed we began our adventure. We rode in a day car with those green mohair seats and the windows open. Wahoo! I even got to go to the back of the train, where the politicians speak from, and watch the world disappear behind us. We made Birmingham after dark. Our Fauntleroy suits filthy, sweaty, and full of cinder dust. Slept a while and snuck out of the Bankhead Hotel about dawn and got back on the train, headed for the Big Easy. I'll explain that sneaking out part later. You see, the old man was a swindler. We got to New Orleans in the late afternoon. It was about the 1st of August and hot. New Orleans hot. Condensation running down the walls hot. We took a cab to a place called Plum Orchard off of Gentilly Boulevard to meet a friend of Dad's who was living there. His name was Harry Chalmers, not his real name. He was a legendary con man from Chicago, and he and Dad, as it turns out, had cooked up this racket. We knocked on the door and waited. I heard the unmistakable sound of the clack of slippers on the bare floor. The door opened and there stood this beautiful blonde woman. Think Gwyneth Paltrow. I knew beauty when I saw it, but being only 9 years old, I wasn't altogether sure why. At any rate, she sure held my attention. From the back came Harry, at least twice her age, suntanned, dapper in his undershirt and linen trousers, and it was the first time I had ever seen a man in sandals. Well, it was like old home week. Harry was so outgoing and welcoming. He introduced the woman as his wife. I never really knew, but Mom seemed a little suspicious. Nevertheless, here we were in New Orleans being served iced tea and wondering what would come next. We talked for a while about the trip and the heat and where we would live. We had spent the entire war living in one house, the longest we had ever lived anywhere, so I had no frame of reference other than my house on South Alabama Street. Just as well, what we would go through now could not have been prepared for by anything we had experienced. Harry had arranged for a place for us to live about 2 blocks down the street, right there in Plum Orchard. There was no orchard in Plum Orchard. My memory of it is I must admit, tainted by decades of malevolent memory, but the following is not exaggerated. World War II had been over about a year, and it was now the height of America's worst housing shortage in history. Places to live were nearly impossible to find. Harry, I suppose, had done us a favor. Here's the favor. Plum Orchard, from now forward referred to as P.O., had been a housing project for the Liberty shipbuilders at the Kaiser Aluminum shipyard, where some of the Liberty ships were built. The war was over, no more need for Liberty ships or workers to build them, no more need to house the workers. Harry had, by hook or crook, obtained the key to one of the units. To this day, I do not know if we were actually bona fide rent-paying residents or just squatters. I don't remember a phone. We did have electricity and running water, sort of. Uh, Portions of New Orleans were at or under sea level. That was sure true in P.O. Walking across the grass was squishy, and I do believe the hastily built sewage system, such as it was, consisted of drainage ditches which winded through all of P.O. The houses were clapboard doubles slapped together and painted navy gray, much the color of a Liberty ship, inside and out. And here's the scary part. There were about 1,000 of them, less than 100 of them actually occupied. Eerie and creepy and full of noises and shadows and things unknown. At least that's how it seemed to a 9-year-old kid. There was furniture in ours, at least, and Harry and the blonde lent us sheets, and an insect-filled night ensued. Mom had to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and I can still remember the sound. It sounded like she was walking on cornflakes. This was followed by, in rapid succession, a scream, lights, bugs of all sizes and shapes scurrying back into dark places, Dad getting up with a swatter, flaying home defense fury, looking for the non-existent flit gun, and then we saw them in both beds too, as we dawned into the realization of icky red welts of various sizes and intensity. Welcome to New Orleans. I think really the adventure, innocent as it was, of Louisiana ended that night. I'm not talking about the adults, I'm talking about Dave and me, for whom an axiom of life had been impressed. There is no joy in an insect bite. Dad went off the next day to work some mysterious deal with Harry, and Mom and her boys went about trying to make the best of a hot, miserable world we had been dropped into.